Welcome to Better Conversations. This is a recording because we're in very different time zones. My guest is Katja Forbes. Katja is one of Australia's leaders in the field of product and experience design, and she gets involved in all aspects of it. So from the research, the emerging technology, all the way through to customer experience, so CX and user experience or UX. She is now the managing director of Designit, Australia and New Zealand. This was after setting up her own business, her own company, which was bought by Wipro in 2018, and is a fantastic speaker, very staunch female leader, tons of energy, as you will find out in a moment when I let her speak. I'm really delighted to have her on. I've known Katja for 20-something years. We were at the same company, Sapient, if I can say that, way back. Our paths have crossed sort of a little bit, but just delighted that we've got her here to talk about the role of leaders and a moral compass. And what we want to get into is the conversation that leaders need to be having. Welcome, Katja.
Oh, thank you. That's a lovely, lovely introduction. And sitting here, I'm now feeling like one of the old ladies of the internet, having been working with you 20 years ago, and that wasn't even at the start of my career.
Well, I think I'm with you there in the age stakes, so we're okay. We're in good company here, and lovely background we were just talking about. Maybe we can get into that a little bit later. I was looking at a talk that you gave back in 2014, and it was called "Ambient Intelligence Can Stalk You with the Very Best of Intentions." That wasn't the title, but that's what you said.
That's what stuck with you out of it. That's quite good. I'm glad that that bit stuck.
Yeah, and so 6-7 years on, a lot's happened for you. You've done a lot of great work, and I'm sure where relevant we'll get into some of that. Now, the latest talk that I saw you give was an Adobe one, where you were talking about leaders have a responsibility within design to ask the tough questions, I guess, and ask how people are going to be impacted. But maybe a place to start, Katja, is for you to tell us more about your work, so that for those who don't really understand this field, to just give them a sense of what it's about.
Thank you. It's a big field, and I think that a lot of people in design practice actually find it tough to describe. Because design itself has changed so much over, the last couple of decades. Whereas, at the most layperson level, the concept of design is like, well, making something look a particular way, or being an aesthetic practice. But over the last couple of decades, and Sapient was actually one of the very first organizations to go with this kind of practice, design has actually become a tool at looking at problems through a different kind of lens, not so much a management consulting lens or a businessy lens. It's about looking at problem spaces and trying to find great solutions from a human-centered point of view. And that, I think, is one of the big differences between how design practitioners of whatever of the many versions of design that live under the umbrella, because there's like brand design and customer experience design and user experience design and product design and user interface design, and all of the possible design, space design, interior design, they all come under that umbrella. But really what we're all working towards is using those tools, those design practice tools, the research practice tools, to figure stuff out. with a very human perspective. So less about the, the dollar bills on the ground and making sure that, we've got business cases that stack up. Sure, we're a contributor to that, but we want to come at it with a more holistic perspective. So I think that, in a nutshell, using the tools of design to solve business problems in a different way to how it's been done in the past.
And there was a great example, I can't remember which one, it may have been in the podcast interview you did recently, which was, it can be as simple as making the experience of making a claim after your house has burnt down.
Yeah.
And that experience itself sort of falls within it. So it's simple, but makes such a big difference to the person who's going through that trauma.
Exactly. It's impactful. But we talk a lot about, designing what matters and finding shared value with the clients that we work with, so value for us and value for them. Now, value doesn't always have to be big and imposing. Designing what matters doesn't always have to be changing, some sort of social innovation in the in the world. Shared value can be something really super unassuming, where you just, you make things better for people who work on an IT service desk, and put in place more supportive processes and better technology to enable them, and doing that all from the human-centered point of view. It can be exactly that insurance claim form. Hey, my house is burnt down and I've got a claim on it. My world is already really, really awful. If your form is going to make my world even more awful, it matters putting time and energy into that. And so I think it doesn't always have to be huge. It can sometimes be very unassuming.
Yeah, but I think that's a great example of something that does affect people's lives, and we don't think about it at all. But thought has gone into it, and it's you've had a good experience when you haven't really had to think about it, or you think, oh, that was easy.
Yeah, isn't it? Designers think about it so you don't have to.
Right.
Basically.
Right. And so that's your world. But there's an important element here, which is that with artificial intelligence, machine learning, it's very exciting. And I know there are some companies that are doing some brilliant stuff in the world of recycling and spotting illnesses and so on, and diseases. But there's a very serious side to it, which is, we're doing things and not necessarily asking the hard questions or asking the questions we should be asking. I wonder if you could share a little more on that.
Yeah, so I think that the invisibility is increasing as algorithms, or the algorithms, or the invisible platforms, however they manifest, are taking more and more control of the interactions that we have. I think it was Edelman Trust Barometer, or was it Juniper? It was one of those thought leadership organizations, which was saying that by 2020, so that's last year, pretty much 85% of the interactions that humans have with companies are actually not going to involve another human. So if you think about mortgage decisioning, that's not done by people, that's done by an algorithm. Even up to things that are not quite as life-changing as whether you're going to get your mortgage or not, but what do you get recommended on Netflix? What are the things that are presented to you in your social media feeds? How is that data all used and processed, and how can we trust what's going on under the surface when we can't even lift up the hood and have a look, because it's unintelligible to us. So more transparency probably isn't going to help us understand any better. There's no point in you being transparent about how your machine learning algorithm works if I don't really understand how machine learning algorithms work.
Right.
Because there's this sort of idea of trust equaling transparency, but that's not actually helpful. Which is not to say that organizations shouldn't be transparent, but when you're designing to be trustworthy, well, then people are going to take that trust leap, and they're not really going to need to know exactly how things work. But I think one of the questions from a leadership perspective is looking at all of those algorithms and all of the things that underpin the technology platforms that we spend our time with, and asking the question about, are we using this in an ethical way? Are we using this in a way that respects people's privacy? Are we using this information in a way that people actually think we should be using it? Because the biggest lie that people tell on the internet is, I have read and agreed to the terms and conditions. Nobody reads and agrees to the terms and conditions, you know. So the types of things that you're agreeing to in participating in these platforms, and, you know, and for example, Facebook, like I participate in Facebook, but I only do it because I don't have a choice. For some of the activities that I do, they all turn up there, and that's where the group lives, and so I need to be there to participate. Otherwise, you know, I'm unable to participate. So I don't have another option. It's not that I trust them, I don't, but it is the tool of use.
Right, right. And there are those third-party apps that are also quite popular, right? Which I find really disturbing. I'm just going to interject here because, you know, the facial recognition ones where you can change your face to look like somebody else. I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. I really don't trust those.
What are they doing with that data?
Exactly.
Where does that facial recognition go?
Exactly.
Because,
it's fun,
you know, that's
but quite.
I know, and nobody. I don't think people stop and think to ask the question. And if people are not going to stop and think and ask the question, then it's on us as leaders to have asked the question. So I can give an example of a service which I find like just morally repellent. And it's a service that is using the advertising platforms in exactly the way that they are designed to work. So it's a service called The Spinner. And what you can do is you can pay a fee to launch a campaign, a targeted campaign towards someone who you know in your social media circles, or someone who you have the mobile phone number of. And you can have content marketing put in front of them to subliminally support a message that you want them to take on board. So more innocuously, you know, get a dog, or, you know, why you should eat less, or something like that. But then there's also packages that you can buy which can promote breast enlargement, promote get back together with your ex. So can you see how very quickly this actually becomes something, and this is not my name for it, but it's like gaslighting as a service. You know, it's a platform that allows you to influence other people without any kind of moral compass around how someone might use it. It's enabling stalking behaviors. It's enabling all sorts of, you know, unintended consequences. Although in this case, I think this is actually fairly intended. So, you know, trying to get your partner to enlarge her breasts, like there's no real, it's pretty obvious what's going on there. But, you know, and we look at that and we go, oh, how can that be a product? How can that be a thing out in the world? But that's exactly how the, you know, Facebook ad targeting works, content marketing works. It targets people with information. And so they're not doing anything illegal. They're not using the platform in any way that it was not intended to work. However, the unintended consequences of this are gaslighting people and subliminally influencing them to perhaps take an action that they ordinarily wouldn't. So it's like there was a leader at some point who needed to ask the question, just because we can, does it mean we should? And the moral compass of the founders of that particular organization obviously fall down on the side of, we want to make money rather than we would like to curate a good social outcome. And that's, you know, disappointing. But I think this is where, you know, social media never had these as its intended consequences. It was never intended to upset, you know, American democracy in the way, or democracy as a whole, or people's trust in news and information. That was never its intended consequence. However, because there is, you know, in small steps or large steps, there hasn't been that moral compass applied to some of the decisions on how they work and what functionality they do and what is allowable, and where, you know, that people are going to step in and say, no, that's not okay. This is how we've seen it snowball into what it is now in, you know, 2021, which is a fairly ugly landscape, where, you know, the facts, alternate facts, fake news, and all of that is absolutely rife.
Yeah.
And these are the things that we look back and go, oh, why didn't somebody do something about that way back then? And one of the things that I always try to make sure that people remember is what matters tomorrow is designed today. So you really need to be asking the questions now. What are the unintended consequences of the thing that I am creating, the platform that I think is a good idea to found, the product that I want to put out there? I mean, I've got another example. There's a lady who I saw give a talk about a tool that uses artificial intelligence to do sentiment analysis. And it does sentiment analysis to determine stress levels, to determine if you're stressed. And the intention behind this tool is that it will go through your Slack, look through your emails, all of your communications as you, interact in your company, and it will give you messages to go, hey, you're looking like you're a bit stressed, maybe take a break, or have a look at what's going on right now so you can see your triggers and maybe make some behavioral changes. So, it's really, that sounds lovely, doesn't it? However, I did ask her, I said, what are you doing to ensure that you don't have the unintended consequences of this actually becoming a corporate surveillance tool, of this becoming something that people's mental health is then the property of someone else, or where they're at with their mental health is the property of someone else? How do you make sure that this doesn't get used against people? And the answer was unsatisfactory.
Well, I think that's true. And I think with the there's been a big push, hasn't there, about mental health and apps to support mental health. I mean, that's just one example, but that is potentially where people are at their most vulnerable. They're sharing data with the intention of that tool supporting them in some way. But as you say, we're placing a lot of trust in either an individual who represents that, or a brand. So that there was something that you talked about, which is this prototyping. And I wonder whether things have moved so fast in the last 20 years that we really haven't, we've got very excited by the shiny stuff. Oh, that's exciting, we can do that. And not thought about and not had a history of actually seeing these unintended consequences. So what's the value of the prototyping that you've spoken about?
Well, I mean, it at least gives you a drip of a possible future to see, what could happen with it, and what might be, how something might be used in a way that you didn't think it was going to be used. I do some sort of, I don't know, intellectual exercises when I look at products, and also when I'm trying to teach people how to design for, an artificial intelligence or something like that, a product like that, or prototype a product like that. And I get them to go through what is the worst case scenario of use of this product or tool. Think about that, and then write yourself a 1-star review, or even a 0-star review of how bad your product is. And this is taken from a fantastic card game that Microsoft has created called Judgement Call. And basically they have a series of ethical principles that sit underneath their artificial intelligence practice. And this card game says, take this ethical principle, come up with a scenario. So for example, transparency, or, privacy, or the ability for the person to control the outcome of their use of the tool. So take this ethical principle that we should be adhering to, put it in a context where we breach that ethical principle, and then write me a 1-star review about how it's going to work. And so, for example, I was, the 1-star review could be for facial recognition at an airport. And the review goes along the lines of, look, I arrived at the airport and went past facial recognition I hadn't even given any consent to, and it misidentified me as a criminal. and I was chased through the airport by the police, and I didn't understand that they were police because they were in plain clothes, and I was crash tackled, injured, put in a room, all because this facial recognition misidentified me because I'm from African-American background, and basically the data that it's been trained to recognize people has pretty much been used by, it's white faces that's been used to train it. So it didn't have enough data to like see that I was different to the criminal picture that they were looking for. So like really going, okay, so facial recognition to look for criminals at an airport, sounds like, yeah, okay, that it could have social benefit. But if it's not executed correctly with the right questions being asked, what data are we using to train it? How are we making sure that we continue to train it? How are we ensuring that we're not embedding biases and racism and sexism and all of the human, the poor human behaviors that we have? How are we making sure that we're not embedding that in these products? And so prototypes are quite powerful in being able to go, all right, well, look, here's the thing. Let's give it to the people who we think are going to use it and see what they do with it. Because when you're inside I'm the founder of the thing or the designer of the thing or it's my idea, this is my baby, you're never going to see it. You're never going to see it ugly. You're always going to think it's a really beautiful baby. So you kind of need to give your baby to someone else to let them have a look at it and go, whoa, ugly baby. Or I could use this baby to do some ugly stuff. It's really, and it's about putting it into context and seeing what happens when everything doesn't go exactly as you thought it was going to.
And I'm curious as to why we struggle to hear or see that ugliness in something. I was watching a documentary series about spies, one of my favorite topics. And, the statistic that was quoted was that 80% of online activity is actually on the dark web, which actually kind of puts things into context that if it's possible to have a bad use for something, it's going to have a bad use. So you almost have to assume, right, that whatever you build also has a negative side to it. And so how do we get into a position where leaders are saying, this is great, it's shiny, it's wonderful, it's going to do all these fantastic things, but how do we get them into that space of asking the question, what's the worst that it could be used for?
Yeah, that I think is one of the really hard things to do, because a lot of leaders, founders, people who have the idea for the thing and are deeply in love with what it's going to do, are going to struggle to ask that question. And this is a gross generalization. I'm sure there are people out there who are asking this question. I think that it's the behaviors that you reward are the behaviors that you get. And so what we see are a lot of software as a service platforms, products that are going out there, which due to the quite a lot of goodness are making a lot of money. And so what I think happens is we have successes that are rewarded with money. And so we go, okay, well, we must be going in the right direction. And startups are scrappy, startups are messy. Startups are, everybody's kind of like pulling things together and bootstrapping it with chewing gum and cat spit to make sure that nothing falls apart. And I think that as soon as you start seeing some of that reward coming in, it's hard to stop and go, whoa, hang on a minute, this is going in that direction. Sure, it's really paying a lot going in that direction, but do we want to explore it a little bit further, maybe prototype out some ideas, check whether or not it's going to have some kind of unintended consequence. And I think that, and people get so excited about their idea. Like, for example, as well, Elon Musk is hugely excited about his Neuralink idea, hugely excited about putting wires into people's brains, hugely excited about the possibilities of uploading data to the brain, downloading data from the brain, all of this sort of stuff. And is so fascinated by what can be conjured by that. Yet there's no discussion, or I've seen no discussion, you know, from him or his team or any in their big PR release talking about what moral compass is guiding this. What ethical frameworks are going to sit around whether or not you should be able to download your memories into a second self, or, you know, because we're now getting into like altered carbon territory where you have a sleeve that you put all of yourself into, and your body is just your body, and really what you are is your data. That's what this is. I mean, it's very far away from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very, but that's the experimentation that's going on. And a lot of the time I see, you know, these types of biomedical product, you know, inventions and aspirations being touted as, you know, it's going to really help people who've got a disability. Yet I've very rarely seen a person with a disability who's going to be helped by the product design involved in the design of the product. And, you know, from the disability community, they say nothing for us without us. You know, don't wash your product with like it's going to help disabled people just to like for you to get going with it. That might be an intended consequence, but holy hell, that like the Neuralink can do, or its intention is to do a great deal more than that. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think it's been thought through. And especially in these sorts of health spaces, the whole, you know, move fast and break things is completely inappropriate. You can't move fast and break things when you're playing around with brains, even if they're pig brains, which is what they are playing with at the moment.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, then we get into a whole nother like vivisection discussion, because really what they're doing is animal experimentation and on sentient creatures. And, mm-hmm. you know, not even makeup companies do that anymore. So yeah, where are we in the ethical framework around that? And they talked about their pigs, and they said that they get their pigs' consent to do the search. And I was just like, what are you people talking about? But what is happening is they're rewarded. The behavior is being rewarded. The idea is being rewarded. I mean, Twitter, Facebook, all of those platforms, even the big software as a service platforms, all of those platforms, they all make a lot of money. And once you start making a lot of money, it's very hard to come back from that precipice. If you're seeing the train go off on the wrong track, like, and there's the other thing that I think is a question for leaders is about maintaining their control. Because to be fair, like, you know, the original founders of Twitter, you know, Jack, he's lost control of his platform. He has no control of that anymore. It's gone. Mm-hmm. So thinking about and asking the question, if we lose control of this, not because somebody hacks it or steals it or whatever, but because the way that it evolves means that we're not the bosses of it anymore. If we lose control, what's the worst thing that can happen? You know, what, and just asking those questions, have the bravery to ask those questions. Because it's not an easy conversation to have. No,
and I think it's ingrained in the culture that you build. And as you say, the behaviors that you reward. And it's, you know, when you know this, when you're building an organization and things kind of, they are scrappy and you know, organic in terms of how they evolve and grow. And who's involved and who were the founding people. And there's a great deal, I think there was, you named it, and it's something I've been it's been in my mind, is this fetishization, if I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, of either entrepreneurs or younger people. And there is a frenzy. It's an absolute feeding frenzy around, you know, startup worlds and scale up worlds and all the whole sort of VC culture and so on that is necessary. But there's also this unhealthy side, which is this adulation that happens, and that stops us asking the questions, as well as causing some unhealthy behaviors and dynamics within teams. And leaders, it is incumbent on leaders to notice those things and call a pause, time out, something, but it's scary. So you know, what would you counsel? What would you counsel for a leader who's got a product or a service that could have that, you know, single star rating? How do you get them to even open up that conversation? Where should they begin?
It is a values-based conversation, and I always have a fundamental belief as a leader that you need to be true to yourself and as brave as you can. And you know, that's something my dad said to me a while back, but it's resonated throughout my career that I've got to be true to myself. And sometimes that means that I have to be as brave as I can be. And sometimes I'm not very brave about something, but I have to be brave enough to stand up and say, I have a question. And I think it's incumbent on our investors as well. It's not just incumbent on our founders and the people who are coming up with these ideas. The money should be attached to a question that says, have you thought about the unintended consequences of this product? Can you tell me what you're putting in place to ensure that the risk is managed on this product so that my investment isn't going to go south as soon as the headline hits the front page of the Sunday Telegraph saying that this product has actually resulted in the deaths of, you know, hundreds of small children, or whatever unintended consequence we end up seeing for a product. So I think that and I'm not sure, because everybody's chasing that unicorn, you know, we want the $1 billion valuation, we're the unicorn, and everybody's chasing that, and the economics of that is not allowing for the thoughtful process or the thoughtful questioning. And so I think we are seeing some changes within investment firms, just simply around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and looking at we will not invest in your product unless you have, you know, gender parity on your advisory board, or there is gender parity, or even, you know, a person of color, or some kind of diversity in the people who we're going to interact with. Because if it's just, you know, stale, pale, and male, then we don't want to give you our money. And we're seeing that with some organizations like BlackRock, I believe. If there's no gender parity on the board, they're not going to put money into a company. Or even, you know, superannuation funds or pension funds are doing similar things. So we are seeing some of those narratives getting into that investment sphere. But and maybe I just need to do some more research, I have not actually seen an example, or couldn't cite an example, where a venture capitalist firm has gone to a founder and said, attached to this money is your assurance that you have thought about the unintended consequences and your plan for managing those risks so that my investment doesn't go south. So that, I think, is probably one of the places in that particular startup culture where we do need to see other people, other leaders, not just the leaders of the startup, other leaders with influence asking that question.
Right.
And I think often the problem is they don't know it's a question to be asked. They just don't know.
Right. Well, hopefully watching this, they'll know it is a question to be asked. And even, but I think you're right. I hear a lot of founders basically say, yeah, that's all very good and nice, but my investors want to see these targets met. And so
they want returns, get the returns. Yeah.
And we got limited resources, and you know, we can only do so much. So, and we have to deliver it fast, right? We have to make those. Even within AI for good, there are cohorts obviously in that space, and I wonder whether even what you've just said is actually being asked. It's not sufficient to just have a cohort that is AI for good, or for social impact, or whatever you want to call it. That it has to be central to the whole sort of program. Is what is the unintended consequence of our technology, and where that could go.
Yeah. And I think the other challenge for it as well is not everybody's moral compass is the same.
Right.
Because everybody comes with their own set of values, their own, you know, agenda. Elon Musk's moral compass is going to be very different to Richard Branson's moral compass. It's, very different to my friend Sabrina Hersius's moral compass. She's an angel investor. She's a Somali refugee who lives in America. And she really intentionally invests in startups opportunities where she can make sure, in her words, that Black and brown people are, thriving and can continue to thrive. And so there are people who are actually applying a moral compass to the money that they issue to startups or ideas. But yeah, it's not necessarily everybody.
Here's a thought, just as I was listening to you then, and this could be an uncomfortable or controversial question. Do women have a stronger moral compass or a willingness to ask the questions that maybe the men haven't asked?
I think any answer to this question would be a gross generalization. So what I would say is that the female perspective is very, very different to the male perspective, simply because of the way that that society is constructed and the gendered narratives that are spoken to us from the absolute, birth and onwards. So I think that any answer to this is just going to be an absolute gross generalization. I think women are great at looking at a problem a different way, and valuing perhaps different things to a male counterpart. I don't think one gender is necessarily going to be better at it than the other. I think one gender definitely has more oxygen in the room to ask the question, just simply by the nature of the construct of our society. Men get more airtime. Men take more airtime. One of my favorite sort of apps is one you can take into a meeting where you press the button when a man is speaking, and then you press the button when the woman is speaking, and it tells you like the percentage of how much airtime gets taken up by which particular gender. So I think that and I'm all about men being a part of the correction, and being champions for that change as well, because unless they are a part of it, it doesn't work. It won't work. We won't actually progress our society forward in an equitable fashion. And part of the challenges that I see in a lot of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and generally, if I see this, then it's called a D&I initiative, which is where somebody asks someone in the organization who is already marginalized by the biases in that organization, like a woman or a person of color or something, a person like that. They ask that person to do the work, to do the emotional labor, or even the actual labor to make change in that organization when they're already exhausted from fighting the biases that they have every single day. And what I generally say to that is go and find somebody in this organization for whom it is working perfectly right now, exactly as it is, and get that person to be your champion for change. And I think in this instance, I don't know that one gender is going to be better at it than another, but I feel like that because of the societal construct and the different experiences that genders and non-binary and people who traverse genders have, the people who are not male not cis male hetero identifying are probably going to have a different perspective and perhaps ask questions that take things in a different direction. Because if we see a lot of design, basic stuff like safety equipment in cars, they're designed for the male body. I just saw an article today that they only put wheels on suitcases when they realized, maybe it would be helpful for women if it had wheels on a suitcase. And they didn't actually because suitcases were designed for men because they will pick things up.
Right.
So I'm paraphrasing an article that literally went across my feed today. But it's those kinds of aspects as well that I think we need to bring diversity of thought to these problems and products and challenge spaces, because if you bring diversity of thought, you get a much more robust solution. And that's one of the things with artificial intelligence and things like that. You've got to have more than pale, stale, and male people interrogating the quality of the product that you're creating. You need to have people who don't look like, you know, the standard white developer bloke, who look at this and go, hey, this doesn't work for me. Or I can see a problem how it's going to be like this for a person of color, or it's going to be like this for somebody who's from, you know, the LGBTQI community. And having people who live that experience every day and can spot that stuff because they see it every day. There's so much value in that. And I don't think it's necessarily one gender or the other. I think it's diversity brought together to spot the stuff that are blind spots for other people. That's where I'm going to go on that one.
Now, I agree with you. I asked it as a little bit of a facetious question, just because I think it comes up and it misses the point. That's not the point. The point is about the diversity of people and the stakeholders who are involved in the design of something, testing of something. That's where it happens. But so we talked about, you know, VCs and potentially boards asking the question in support of leaders trying to ask the question as well. Is there something that within a process, a sort of really practical way within a meeting that you've seen work really well, or that you use to basically pose those questions, to pose the different perspective?
Yeah, it always depends on the context and all your stakeholders and all your personalities and things like that. For me, one of my favorite ways of framing or posing a question about something is to use it's actually a really good feedback construct called situation, behavior, impact. And the way that it works is basically you go, this is the situation that we all find ourselves in. Here is the context. These are the behaviors, or these are the things that I'm seeing happening in this organization, or that, you know, even that these are the things that this product is being designed to do, or these are the behaviors that I'm seeing around this product design, or whatever it is, whatever the thing is. So you've got your situation, you have your behaviors, and then you call out the impact, and you say the impact of these behaviors or these particular features in the tool or the platform or whatever is X. I'm seeing that where there's a lot of toxic conversation around our product on Twitter from this particular group of people who are, marginalizing this other group of people because of something in our product or because of some behaviors in our organization. Is that the result we're going for? And asking for that self-reflection, saying, is that what we're really going for here? Because if it's not, we need to make a change. And it's not about going in with an opinion. It's going in with a situation, with observation and facts, things that you can back up with some kind of data or whatever. Explaining an impact and describing an impact, and then asking for a reflection from the board, from whoever, this is so if you looked, I'm trying to think of a good example of this that's going to be resonant across the entire world.
Not it's easy.
Well, I mean, there's a basic one. Just to show you how the framework works is like, hey, so Jessie, in the last meeting where we were all presenting the ideas that we have for the product to move forward, I noticed that we were there all together and everybody had something to contribute. What I noticed during that meeting is that every time that Sarah tried to talk, you actually cut her off and talked over the top of her. The result of that was that we didn't hear from Sarah very much for the rest of that meeting, and we didn't get to include her ideas, some of which might have been really valuable for us to go forward and, improve the product. Was that what you were going for? Because if it's not, How about we talk about a different way of behaving? Or, you know, and that's a sort of a feedback behavior model, but you can use it exactly the same way to go, here's our situation. This is what we're doing with our product. These are the impacts I'm seeing. Is that what we're going for? And then I think you can have a really good conversation semi-objectively about facts and impacts and where everybody's trying to go. You are better positioned to have those conversations if you have an organization that has a clear purpose, or a product that has a clear purpose, that is underpinned by a set of values that everybody aligns to, that drive you towards that purpose, and that everybody knows what behaviors exhibit those values. And so that having that sort of construct around a product, around a platform, around a company helps you have those conversations, because you've got some anchors to hang on to. Like, you know, if one of your values is around, you know, I guess, always displaying stewardship, for example. It's one of Wipro's values. So always displaying stewardship. So looking at how do we, in our day-to-day, in every interaction, in every email, in every conversation, in everything, how do I demonstrate stewardship? How do I make sure that my behaviors uphold that value so I can drive this company forward towards its purpose? And in the conversation, the hard conversation where something is going wrong, if you've got something to hark back to say, you know, here's the situation, we've got the product that we're, you know, we've launched it out into market, and we're seeing that these are the results of particular features. This is not a great impact, and I think really doesn't align with our value of, you know, don't screw over the user, or whatever your value is that you put underneath your product. Is that what we're going for? Because our value is this, but the impact of the feature decisions that we've made is this. So what do we do here to get a different result? Because I'm not seeing that this is the result that we're after. And then, asking for that self-reflection.
Right. And I love how you phrase that.
Sense?
Absolutely. Well, what you described as, you know, that kind of, it's almost like a feedback conversation, right? But to realign on the behaviors and treat them with dignity, give them an opportunity to course correct, and do that, and not assume that they meant bad, that there was malice intended, but treat it as using data and facts and evidence and observations, right, to do that, but always give people a voice in that process. And the same if you're designing a product or service, your end user needs to have a voice, and that needs to be factored into what you're designing, how you define your success, either as a business or a team or whatever. So
genius design is not a thing. Like one person can't design something for every person. Like you've got to have people give you information about what they need, or discover from them by just observing them what they might need and they don't know they need, which then gives you a really great opportunity to create something new and innovative to add value. So it's
as many perspectives as you can get, right, and as practical to kind of pull together and so on.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Okay, so we've got a couple of options for people to kind of think about and discuss seriously, because I think we are, while there are some organizations and businesses, scale up startups that are really thinking about this ethical component, there are so many more that are not. And in the way that we find ourselves with social media today, it's going to run away. I mean, we're in danger of losing control over even the conversation, or being able to rein some stuff back in before we do it. So
control of that conversation is already gone. But I would say, because, you know, as advice for leaders, having these kinds of conversations, they can be nerve-wracking conversations. They can be confrontational conversations. And so the advice that I would always have is be really prepared. And the reason why I really like having the framework for the conversation is you're not just talking.
Yes.
You've got a path that you're trying to follow, the point that you're trying to make, a series of steps that you use to get there, with underlying data to support your point of view. So it's a calming way, I think, of going into a difficult conversation with just like with a path to follow, rather than just trying to react or just get it all out there and have it come out wrong. So I would really strongly advise creating, even if the path that I describe is not the path that works for you, storyboard out a little bit your conversation that you're trying to have, and the result that you're trying to get to, and then follow your plan for the conversation, and that will give you confidence.
I think underestimating that these things you can't just go into these conversations. These are not small conversations. These are ones that require preparation, and maybe quite a bit of preparation before you actually engage, even with your team or with a customer and so on, to really think and brainstorm about all the possible things that could come up, all the possible points of view or perspectives and so on, that you need to have, not get knocked over by, not get thrown by. So that gives you confidence. So definitely.
I think anybody, when you feel like you're in your sweet spot on a topic and you've got enough to help you with your point of view and get your point of view across, it's going to be 100% better than just winging it.
Absolutely.
Says the queen of winging it, to be fair. Like that, anybody who watches this and hears me say that and go, yeah, sure, pot, kettle, sure.
Well, I think it's the having a strategy means you need less courage, because the strategy almost reveals so much to you that
hold on to.
It compels you to take action or do something, or to have the confidence. So rather than feeling like I've got to have courage to speak up, actually do the thinking beforehand, right? I think this has been a really wholesome conversation, and I'm sure we could take it in lots of other directions. I wondered if there's anything else that you wanted to add that you think, is really pertinent to the conversation about leaders needing to have more of a moral compass in these spaces.
Yeah, I wish that this was mine, but this is from David Morrison, Australia's one of our chief of army. He was our chief of army. He's moved on to other roles now. And this one has stuck with me ever since I heard him first say it, which is the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. If you don't intervene, if you don't do something, then you're complicit. You're part of the problem. And so I often look at circumstances or situation and go, is that something that I can walk past? Is that something that I can go, I did nothing to correct that or change that or impact that in some way? And that helps me with my moral compass to decide, am I going to get involved in this? Or is this something that I can affect change on, or that I should affect change on? My second piece of advice is don't die on every hill, as well. You've got to choose the hills you're going to die on, and some hills are worthy. Some hills are so worthy of absolutely spilling all the possible, whatever. But you have a finite amount of energy that is available to you for really rumbling. So, doing a hard rumble with your team, or a hard rumble with your board, or a hard rumble with anybody. So use your energy wisely and make sure that the things that you decide to really get into, that is worth it, that it aligns with your personal sense of purpose. And everybody's personal sense of purpose is really, really different. But once you have a sense of what is your purpose in the world, the thing that for you makes your time here valuable, then you can choose that to go, okay, I'm going to go this one I've really got to take a stand on. So for me, my personal purpose is to be a steward of insightful and ethical use of data across business and design and technology for great societal outcomes. And I will die on any hill that aligns to that purpose. But I won't fight with somebody about something that's not as important, or that someone else maybe has already got it. So I don't need to weigh in. Perhaps I do a small back channel support rather than, get on the front line with it. But yeah, those would be my two pieces of advice for leaders who want to get into a good rumble on something that's hard.
I love that. I love that. I think those are very visual things that are going to stay with me for quite a while, those two pieces. They're brilliant. Katja, thank you so much. Always, we have to do more of this, I think. But
You are
really
so welcome.
lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you.